I'm currently writing an article about the subject of constellations, or specifically family constellations. And while writing it, I felt that actually speaking about it might add some of the, let's say, emotional urgency I would put to the matter. First of all, for all who are not very familiar with the term or have just heard about it, what is a constellation or family constellation? A constellation would be an approach or a method where you usually have a group of people, and these people then represent something or someone, and the interactions between the people then shall lead to the resolution of an emotional issue, or facilitate the emotional process of a person. So it is a method that it is used in the psychotherapeutic context, and is also being used by many therapists or non-therapists who are trying to approach emotional issues. The main reason I'm starting speaking about this now is that in the recent time, I hear more and more reports from people who tell me about their therapeutic experiences. And of course, in my line of work, that happens all the time. But there seems to be an accumulation of, it's being mentioned by someone coming to me or talking to me online and saying, yes, and I've done a constellation or a family constellation. And I then ask, okay, then what happened there? And then I am very often surprised and sometimes disturbed about what actually was going on there. And I think it has two sides which I would like to address. This will be mainly a very critical piece. Let me make the following very clear. Constellations, specifically family constellations, are a very powerful method when done right. They can play a role in the therapeutic process, and sometimes they have to, because therapists will know that sometimes you hit kind of a roadblock with your usual methods, and then the family constellation can be a tool in the context of your toolbox that can get something done that you cannot get done in a different way. So it has its place, and it is sometimes a method that you have to have in your repertoire in order to achieve certain results. Now, that being said, let me also differentiate between constellation and what is a family constellation. Basically, a constellation would be any setting where you assign certain roles to a group of people, each individual person, and then let dynamics do the work, kind of. And you certainly apply certain rules, and then you see what happens and what comes out of that. So a typical example that's being told to me is that certain emotions of one person are being assigned to the people in the group. So there is the one main person, the person that is the focus of the group. Let's call him the client. And the client then assigns, for example, emotions to the members of the group. Say, okay, this person is my anger, that person is my sorrow, this person is my happiness, and so on and so forth. And then certain rules are applied, and then the goal of the whole thing to happen is some resolution of the emotional situation that is at hand. Like, how does the anger interact with the fear, and so on and so forth. I think you can already expect from my tone of voice that I feel that this approach has very limited effectiveness compared to a family constellation that is well done. But I'm getting to that later. Now, in contrast, a family constellation would be a similar setting. One person is the client or the patient, and that person puts members of the group as members of their own family and him or herself. So the person says, okay, you are my father, puts the person in the room. You are my mother, puts the person in the room, and so on and so forth, going through the main inner family circle usually, or all the people that are primarily relevant for a certain issue that needs to be processed. So ultimately then the person puts him or herself, so there is like a surrogate for him or her in the scene. And then usually that person goes out of the scene and things are going to happen. When I'm describing that, I am basically describing to you the should-be version of it. And I will go into more detail later in how I see a family constellation should be done to be safe and effective. But basically, these are the two kinds of situations you can have. Either there are emotions being put there, or maybe some people have more fantasy and try other things out. But this is what is being told to me most of the time. At least that's what's going on here in Barcelona, where I'm based currently. So a lot of these emotional constellations are being done. And on the other hand, I would say you have family constellations, but there might be other manifestations that I'm not aware of, and probably for good reason. So then the whole thing has two sides for me, two perspectives, basically. The two perspectives are the one of the clients, the participants, and the one of the therapists. And I would like to talk about both perspectives here today. And the other dimensions I would like to talk about is what makes a constellation effective or ineffective, and what makes them harmful or safe. So you see there comes up a matrix of basically 4 fields that I would like to speak about today. Well, let's start with the perspective of the participants, and when it comes to effectiveness. So the effectiveness of methods when it comes to emotional processing or therapy is kind of a black box. And I start with that because I think it is connected to a very fundamental issue that we're facing when it comes to the whole world of coaching, emotion coaching, therapies in general, and so on and so forth. And I do not think that it is a bad thing in general that there are many different players trying to do good things when it comes to mental health or emotional well-being, however you want to call it. Basically, it's a good thing that many people are interested in that, and that there is some attention in that field finally. But when it comes to quality, basically quality seems to be a black box. And I believe what is missing here is comparison. And when you have, if you compare this field with the area of commodity products, when it's about marketing something, everything goes by comparing. If you want to purchase one thing, you will compare it to another, at least the features. So you expect in a certain way that features are being made transparent. So what can I expect? How good is it really? And then, of course, you always know that what the vendor is trying to sell to you, and the blooming words that are being used are, if not always 100% true, so at least you're aware that usually the most positive aspects and the selling points are communicated to you. So we're all aware that if you really want to know if something works well, you go and look at reviews and testimonials and so on and so forth. So that is something that we seem not to do appropriately in the world of methods that deal with our emotional well-being or mental health. And I see that those responsible are on both sides of the game. It's the providers who usually do not make transparent what they do. So if you go on YouTube or anywhere else and try to find actual full videos of certain methods being applied, then you will have a hard time finding some. There are very few examples compared to many other areas of our lives. Sometimes I like to compare that to the fitness industry, where you have also a lot of opinions, a wide variety of offers to reach certain fitness goals. But then in the end, you expect these people to show results or to explain methods transparently to you. And interestingly, those are also the channels that you see on YouTube which flourish, which thrive, and where common sense and reasoning is being brought together with actual visible results. And fortunately, the promises of getting certain results in a shortcut way and just with low investment of time and effort are being, called out as what they are, which is usually just a frank lie or a sham or even a scam or whatever they might be. So if you take that to the realm of the work with emotions and mental health, there is no such a thing. It seems to me that intrinsically practitioners are very scared in comparing themselves and in really actually showing what they do. It's usually a huge talk about and the word creations that are being used to name new methods, new and new means, old stuff with a new name. So there is no limit to fantasy how to speak about a method. When I'm trying to describe what the concept I'm putting together here in emotion coaching, when I'm trying to describe what that is able to achieve, I find myself using words that have been so colossally being overused that it is cheesy, if not pushing the wrong buttons because everybody is using them. So I would say that actually talking about your method bears very little results, and actually it just contributes to the problem. So I've been switching my approach to actually showing the demonstration videos of my seminars and so on and so forth. But I do not want to digress, but it's connected to the main issue, which is that if somebody who talks to you about a certain experience with a method, be it therapy or emotional well-being or whatever it is, all the person can tell you is, yes, it did something, and yes, I did like it, or I didn't, or I did something or did not do something. Where's the quantification? Where's the comparison? So few people actually can compare because few people actually have done a similar thing at more or less the same time in their lives. In order to really compare, you would need several experiences. But then since these experiences seem to take a long time, and also from the practitioners of many methods, they proclaim that, it takes a long time for that to actually really show effectiveness. So basically the time passes and you will not be able to compare. And I am saying that it's not just a methodological side effect that it's difficult to compare. It is an inherent feature of the culture around methods when it comes to emotional well-being, that people do not like that you look in their toolbox and that you really look at it objectively. And I'm also proclaiming that in my opinion, it is all too often ego being attached to it. People do not want to compare themselves to others because they want to be the ones who figure it out and whatnot. But that is a problem. And in the end, it results in a lower quality for clients and patients. I know it's a strong statement, but without rambling about that for too long, a couple of years of experience and a lot of frustration and a lot of listening to clients who come to me and tell me stories about wasting years of their lives in the wrong or the ineffective approaches to their issue. It's quite frustrating. And I know the saying that you shouldn't promote your own thing by putting dirt on somebody else's parade. That's not my approach here. But I also learned that it is part of acting responsibly in calling out things that do not work or need to be improved. So when you go to a Constellation event, so you heard about it, okay, it might be something you're curious about, you read about it a little, and it seems to you like, okay, I have maybe a thing that could match with the method, so let's just go. So you will find very many offers in your area that you can just go to, you just sign up, and there are even meetups being done where you can just go. And the problem with that is not availability. I mean, I praise availability if it's availability of something that is sound. But one of the main aspects here is if there is no preparation for a constellation, then there is a problem. Now I'll tell you why. A constellation, if it should be efficient, is by definition deep. Very deep. It is as deep as it gets. And by definition, if you as a practitioner want to catalyze a deep process, then you have to know the people. You cannot never, ever jump in processing deep things with people who you don't know, where you don't know what's the background. So if there is not at least one or two one-on-one sessions, which with each of the participants, you cannot do a constellation. Or you can only do a constellation, which you call a constellation, but which will be so superficial that it's basically a waste of time. Let's not forget, whenever you put a group of people in a room together and let them do anything, you will always have something happening. So they will always go home and say, oh, this was interesting and that was interesting and whatnot. But you haven't used the full potential of the method. And then you shouldn't call it a constellation because it's basically putting down the method. So I know so many people now who come to me and say, yeah, I did a constellation, but nothing really happening there. Yeah, because it wasn't done well. It wasn't done right. If a constellation is being done right, specifically family constellation, you will have done a great deal of your processing work. That is guaranteed. But it needs to be done right. So, I know that two groups of people might listen to that, the participants and the practitioners. And I'm talking to both groups here at the same time. So try to take out of that whatever is useful for you. So if you're a participant or thinking about going to such an event, if there is no preparation before that, forget about it. It is either inefficient or dangerous. And that brings me to the other facet of it. There are people out there who use this powerful approach, which goes very deep, very quickly, and they do not stabilize before and after sufficiently. It does not. The one aspect of the stabilization are one-on-ones. So ideally, and that's if I do a group, I would always want to know everyone in the group through a one-on-one. You have to know as a practitioner what are the resources, what's the safe place, what are the emotional resources. Also, you have to have the map about what's the trauma like. You cannot, now let's go into a detail, because what's really happening in an effective family constellation. Let's say someone wants to resolve a family issue that is just vaguely clear, but there seems to be abandonment or some kind of abuse have been going on. So something that would be worth doing a constellation for, right? That would be the topic that would be for. So the client will put someone for the father, the mother, other relatives, and him or herself. And if then somebody is being put as surrogate in the group for the client, and you have no idea what the traumatic landscape of that person is, what triggers are, and so on and so forth. And now imagine the worst case, that person has childhood abuse, be it sexual or abandonment or whatever, and then you put the person in that role, and during the processing, the person will need to actually go through that abuse. You will trigger the person, re-traumatize the person, and then you have not even a means to stabilize the person. So that is a catastrophe. It is preventable, and it must not happen. So you have to know all the people, at least with a one-on-one. And even if you unravel that there are too many unprocessed trauma, it's just too much of a chaotic landscape there, you barely can stabilize a person in that session, then the family constellation is just too early. Then it is not yet time for that. Some things need to be processed already. So the first session, I'm not saying the one-on-one is enough and then everybody can go to a family constellation. Please not. It is just the bare minimum so that a practitioner who acts responsibly can recognize who is suitable for it and who is not and needs something else. So how about if you have, if you find out that somebody has not many issues as a practitioner, well, great. Then that person can, of course, be a very valuable member of the group, will then not need as much attention, and can help someone else to resolve their thing. So somebody where you don't find too many deep things can be very helpful. Usually the people who are interested in that matter have had things in their past, which some of them already have processed to a certain degree. And those are very valuable members of such a group. They make a huge contribution and help others who are a little behind in their processing, help them resolve these things. So the main thing I see, which I absolutely criticize, and I think it's a no-go and a dark red flag, is doing constellations without preparation. So the other thing is the follow-up. Also here, just doing a meetup on a Saturday afternoon for 3 hours and doing a constellation, then everybody goes home to maybe sign up to your whatever services you offer. That is not an approach. The follow-up has to be part of the group. There has to be at least another group where things can be picked up, stabilization can happen, and there has to be a way for these people to get in touch with you as a practitioner on a one-on-one basis, which does not have this barrier of another high price. I know as practitioners, you also have to charge for your services. So if someone needs it, they should also pay for it. So maybe a solution for that situation or that tension that's being created is stop communicating the constellation as a one-time event. It just isn't. It has to happen in the context of an already built relationship with each client or patient that you might have. So that is basically it when it comes to the main safety concerns. There are others, but that is the most urgent for me to communicate about the others that are coming up. I'll write about that in the blog article I'm currently writing that gave, the inspiration to that podcast today. When it comes back to effectiveness, what can you expect? When you see now these things that I just recommend, if they are implemented, you can already guess that you get a different effect out of it. And you can have the expectation that if you are in the role of the one being the focus of the group, when you're the one, when your case is being done by the group, that you will make a considerable step in your process. That's what you can expect. You have to know that not always it cannot be everybody's turn all the time, because the ideal group should be 8-10 people. That would be the ideal size. Group size. Actually, interesting point, because I've heard about groups with 4 people. Well, 4 people are by definition not a group. And what can you do with 4 people? It's just too little to give any meaningful family context. There are always more people in need, because usually you need the other generation too. You need grandparents. Also, often when it comes to transgenerational trauma, to resolve the trauma on the grandparents level, or even one level higher, you need more people. And I would say 8 to 10 is a minimum. Another mistake that's being done is making groups too big. And I have to say that is mainly for ego purposes, or it's for commercial purposes. If you get 20 people there, okay, it's 20 times the fee. I get it. But first of all, you don't need that many people. Second of all, you can put the people you don't need in an audience. There's nothing to say against a constellation of 10 people and you have an audience of 500, or you have an audience even online watching it. Fantastic. Let people witness these things when they're done right. That is fantastic. But getting all these people and paying their fee, they will not get the same out of it. And you don't need that many people for the core process. Usually not that many people are involved in that family dynamics, which is relevant to the issue of the person being in the focus of the group. It just isn't. Or they're not that important, so 10 is fine. So split the group, do your 8 to 10 group on stage or in the center, put the rest in the audience. Totally fine. And don't make everyone pay the same. When I learned family constellations, the setting was always that the person being in the focus of the group paid slightly more, because that person is getting more out of the group than the others. I think that's a fair thing. If you have a payment model where people have to pay for your services, if it's not being taken care of by health insurance and so on, it's totally legitimate. Why not let that person pay a little more? If it's well done, nobody will complain about that. Really won't. The other thing is that groups are nice to do in a way because everyone can contribute a small fee, and then for the practitioner, it is a reasonable pay for the time. So it's kind of, everybody contributes. But this cannot lead to a situation where, out of the financial desperation that we find in the emotional well-being area, people are just putting up groups because everything else doesn't work and people cannot afford you having you one-on-one. You cannot victimize the one-on-ones for just getting groups going. That's connected to what I said earlier. There is no way, and this is why I do so few groups, because I would need to do one-on-ones with everybody. And usually I'm not that interested in doing that and putting it up in such a structured way. Also, I see the market difficult for that. people are so used to just signing up and going somewhere that there is a great deal of education that has to happen to make people understand that you actually have to have a one-on-one or more before that. And then you have the group or two. And then there is a follow-up. So basically this podcast is part of that vision of mine to empower participants and empower practitioners to recognize what does really matter and what makes the difference in the end. And to the practitioners, I can say you are implementing a method that can be very, very powerful. And if you don't do it right, you're basically wasting everybody's time, including your own. And you're, in a way, discrediting the name of the method. So get a real training on it and put in the necessary time. The other thing is you need to have other methods in your repertoire, in your toolbox, in order to deal with the things that come up. If done right, and if the person is traumatized, you're working on with the group, you will need other skills than the group to deal with the trauma. There is no way around that. So if you do not have well-founded skills in dealing with trauma, then don't do a group. What are you doing it for? That's why you're doing the group. Okay, so it has to happen in the context of more happening, and it is not a weekend activity. It is just not a yoga class on the beach. All right, it is just not that. Okay, I think I was clear here, and I'm looking forward to your feedback and comments, and hope that could help to bring a little bit of clarity to the whole discussion of constellations. I'm sure that was not the last time I spoke about it, and I'm looking forward to the next time. Thank you for